The rainwater hits the sun and falls on a tent. Outside, a bunch of undead are gathered. Someone bangs on the door desperately, asking to be let in. He says he's Zhang Heng. Inside, people are hiding while he desperately begs to be saved. However, the door is being blocked by 3 guys and one of them wonders what they are going to do. That's when a blonde girl shouts, telling them to let him in. She says Zhang Heng is a classmate, and they can't abandon him like that, so they should let him in now. However, one of the guys says that it's crazy because surely he must have already been bitten by the zombies. The blonde replies that it doesn't matter, she's the class representative, and she wasn't going to abandon her friends so she would take responsibility for whatever happened. She points out that leaving him out there screaming for help is the same as killing a person. One of the guys grits his teeth. He turns to the guy next to him named Yibai and says he's going to open the door and that Yibai should close it as soon as the person enters. Before Yibai can respond, the guy starts counting. Everyone was on edge. On the count of 3, he turned the doorknob. However, at that moment, Yibai was pushed by the guy who had already turned into a zombie. Everyone inside the room was shocked and the protagonist shouted, warning that Yibai had already been infected. The blonde tries to run and everyone starts begging for help. The poor protagonist uses his hand to defend himself from the bite. Naturally, he gets his arm bitten. At that moment, he starts writhing in pain and strangely begins receiving memories. That day, he lost his arm. The creatures invaded and everyone tried to escape. Soon after, the entire city had been taken over by the end of the world. A hooded man asks if he's sure he knows what he's doing. Doctor watches him and he knew he had only 2 things to do. With that, he pressed the door handle. The first was to save himself and the second was to seek revenge. Now he was back in the present. At the moment before the door was opened, after living his entire life in an apocalypse without an arm, he was back to when it all started. Outside, Jiang is banging, asking to be let in. And the blonde once again says to open the door, saying that she was the representative and wasn't going to abandon her classmates. Ibai recognizes Ruwashi and wonders why she looks so young now. She asks if they are deaf and tells him to let Jiang in because if they don't, they'd be killing that guy. Ibai celebrates that everything he had planned had worked and he came back to change the world. He then calls out to the representative. He warns her that Zhang Heng, who's outside, might have been bitten by a zombie, so how was she going to deal with the consequences? She responds that since no one saw him being bitten, there was no way to know, and as the representative, she would take responsibility for everything. Ibai smiles and says that's fine. He takes her hand and tells her that since that's the case, she could personally open that door. Ruwashi is startled and the other girls are in disbelief that he told her to do it. The representative yells at him, saying that he's not a real man for asking a woman to do that. However, he says that for someone who wasn't risking anything, she sure was trying to sound morally righteous. He tells her that in the end, she's just a hypocritical woman. But Ruwashi screams and tells him to shut up. She says she's going to open that door because she was never afraid. She calls them a bunch of cowards and tells them to get out of the way. With that, she turns the doorknob. And at that moment, Zhang Heng pushes everyone, already transformed. Once again, everyone in the room is shocked. The door falls to the ground and Ruwashi slowly gets up. However, that's when she gets startled. The infected Zhang Heng was face to face with her. He charges at her immediately, and everyone in the room starts trying to escape. She grabs the guy next to her, saying she was scared. Before he could react, she pushes him, telling him to protect the representative. But a foot comes crashing down. It was Ibai who kicked her in the ribs. The guy threw her as bait for Zhang Heng. Our boy smiles while the zombie grabs her by the waist, and the monster goes straight for her ear. But at that moment, someone grabbed a screwdriver, and they blew the zombie's head apart. The poor girl was drenched, while our boy just had a sinister grin. However, she falls outside, embraced by the zombie. She turns to Ibai and begs to be saved. But he remembers how much he's suffered in the past life because of this girl's persecution. He grabs the door off the floor and starts to close it while she asks him what he thinks he's doing. With that, he locks her outside. He turns to everyone and asks why they weren't closing that door. The scared and fearful group started saying they were going to block the door. They then piled all the furniture, boxes, and ladders in front of it. Outside, Ruwashi kept banging, asking what they were doing. While she pleaded for help, everyone was blocking the entrance. She kept struggling, saying she was the class representative and couldn't be treated like this. The other girls didn't have the courage to do anything. Meanwhile, the rest of the group continued blocking the room. Ibai stood there, watching everything. Time passed, and finally the rain stopped. The group commented that they could no longer hear Ruwashi's voice. Now, everyone in the room was afraid of Ibai for kicking the representative. As far as they remembered, he had been an extremely kind boy. So why did he seem to have suddenly become a different person? Ibai looked back at that moment. The girls were all terrified and crying. The protagonists asked why it seemed like everyone was afraid of him. Hesitant, they answered that they weren't. The blonde boy thanked him, saying that if it hadn't been for him, he would have been killed by the representative. Everyone started siding with Ibai, saying that girl was filthy and only wanted to kill the guy to save herself. Ibai smiled. He said that since everyone was so brave, they should open the door because he wanted to take a look outside. The group was a bit scared, wondering why he wanted to go out. He then said he agreed that kicking her hadn't been a good idea and he wanted to see how she was doing now. His friends, however, insisted, saying it was crazy since there were zombies outside. But Ibai shouted, telling everyone to get out of the way. Scared, of course, the group started moving everything out of the way. They opened the door and slowly, he stepped outside. He stepped onto the grass and said that apparently the representative and Jiang Hung had disappeared. The sun had risen and the zombies had vanished. At that moment, the group closed the door on him. From inside, they yelled that they shouldn't let that crazy murderer back in because he would kill everyone. However, Ibai didn't seem to care at all. He continued walking across the field while everyone wondered if he had lost his mind. That's when the blonde boy was startled. A female zombie was standing face to face with Ibai and he was calmly walking toward her. The creature noticed him, but he calmly kept approaching. He smiled and gripped the tool. In the next moment, he rushed at her and everyone was left wondering why he was charging at the zombie. The poor creature didn't even understand what was happening when she took a blow to the head. Boy, if he didn't stop, he smashed her right into the ground and that was that. The group inside was now certain that guy had gone insane. However, our protagonist was pretty exhausted for someone who had just done all that. The boy went over to the creature's remains and pulled out a pearl. He smiled and found an energy stone. That wasn't just the origin of the apocalypse, but also an extremely necessary material. At that moment, even a footstep behind him. He turned and faced an old zombie. The monster was coming at him slowly. Ibai grabbed the tool again, ran toward it, and everyone inside saw him finish off another one. The girl was nearly vomiting while the blonde boy wanted to know why he had gone so crazy. As far as he could remember, that kid had been a coward, so how had he changed so much? Everyone began thinking about how terrifying he was and believed he was pretending to be someone else. One of the boys said it was a good idea to let him back in since he was really strong and could help kill the zombies. But the others didn't want to support that because he was a lunatic and could end up killing everyone. Suddenly, the window shattered. Ibai asked if his classmates were still in there. He told them to come outside and kill zombies because it was a lot of fun. The poor souls were all trembling. And at that moment, they warned him something was behind him. A zombie had appeared and leaped at him. But Ibai just looked, stretched out his foot, and kicked it in the chest. Once again, he grabbed the tool and struck it in the jaw. As he finished off the creature, the group watched, terrified from behind. Another one fell dead to the ground. Our boy wiped his face while everyone else was too stunned to say anything. He noticed he was being watched and commented that he didn't know if this liquid was going to infect him. He said he wanted to travel with his friends, but it was too risky since he didn't want to hurt them. With that, he left, saying he hoped they would all survive. His friends wondered if he was really going to leave just like that. And with that, they were all left behind in that room. Our boy walked alone across the campus. He climbed the stairs while thinking that this was the beginning of the apocalypse. On the first day, 50% of the population had been infected, and politics, the economy, and society had collapsed. The number of creatures kept increasing, along with humanity's fear and despair. Professor Zanhan named this period the Dark Era. In his past life, he had to tear off his own arm to survive that day. For 15 years, he endured hunger, despair, and torture, until he finally met a man known as the Mechanic, who was able to send him back to the past. Calmly, he walked through the streets. Some people watched him from hiding, wondering if he wasn't afraid of dying. Others suggested inviting him inside, but they said that if he was walking alone, he must be dangerous. Yabai ignored everything and walked near a park. The zombies were there standing still, seemingly ignoring him. But as soon as he turned his back, those bastards came after him. The blonde boy shouted that the kid was going to die, and the old man said it was crazy to go out looking for food in a world like this. However, Yabai just smiled, grabbed his tool again, and struck the first one in the head. One more swing, and another zombie fell to the ground. A hard slam into the ground, and the guys watching wondered where all that courage came from. But someone else was watching him from behind a curtain. A girl muttered that sooner or later, she would kill that bastard. Man, what's that about? Our boy is killing zombies. Why are you mad at him, girl? After finishing off 3 creatures, our boy was exhausted. But then he heard something else, a flock of birds coming from behind. 3 more zombies were approaching. He quickly realized he couldn't handle all of them. The zombies slithered towards him, and he ran off. He knew the previous noises had attracted a horde to that place. From inside another house, a spunk watched, saying that a kid was running straight toward them. That's when Yabai noticed a convenience store next to him. He started banging on the door, asking to be let in. He looked at the camera and said he needed help because he was being chased by a horde of zombies. The old man on the other side said it was ridiculous, and no one would ever open the door for a kid like that. But suddenly, the gate began to rise. At the same moment, a zombie turned the corner. It leaped toward him, and Yabai hit it in the head, but an old woman was coming down the avenue, and he struck her in the face with the tool as well. He dove under the gate and rolled inside. The zombies started pounding on the door, but finally, he was safe for a while. And man, what he found was a loaded base. From behind a computer desk, a little girl was watching him. Meanwhile, at the nightclub next door, Spank was watching and saying that it looked like that kid was killing everything. The guy with the mohawk turned and told Brother Centipede that a student had killed about 6 zombies on his own. The least cliché guy in the apocalypse laughed. As always surrounded by women, it seemed like those zombies were weaker than he thought. If a student could manage it, it obviously wouldn't be hard for them. Back at the convenience store, Yabai smiled. He looked at the counter and told the person behind it to come out because he had already seen her. Besides, she should hand over the key so he could lock the door. But the person on the other side remained silent. He let out a sigh and started groaning, saying that his wound hurt a lot and he was about to die. Suddenly, the girl came out from behind the counter. She stepped in front of him and tossed him some medicine. But man, he's cruel. He grabbed her by the arm. For God's sake, don't turn this into a romance. She looks like someone's daughter. Yabai told her to hand over the control, assuring her he wouldn't do anything. She asked what control he was talking about, but she clearly had it in her hand. He reached for it and snatched it from her grip. Immediately, she ran off in a panic. She came behind the counter and kept watching him. Man, he kicked one of the shelves, startling the girl. He said she was an idiot for believing him when he said he was injured. Some time passed and it started raining. Our boy was lying on the bed, exhausted. The same little girl was tending to his amputated arm. Obviously, Yabai was in excruciating pain. After a while, she said she was done and our boy thanked her for saving him. She opened a first aid kit and said that it was really dangerous outside and her father had told her to stay here. He could rest there and later she would bring him some food. With that, she left the room while he thought she was way too kind. She was the only person out of all the doors he knocked on who let him in. If it weren't for her, he would have been eaten by those zombies outside. But after a while, he heard her asking what some guys were doing. That immediately woke Yabai up. Some people were standing in front of the store and the so-called centipede thanked her for opening the door for his friends. Frightened, the little girl asked if they just wanted some food because they were hungry. He said that's exactly what they wanted and now all the food in that place belonged to him. She told them her father would be back soon. But the guys said her father had already been used as bait for the zombies and now that no one was there, they could start playing a game. Yabai stood in the corner listening as they took the girl's life. After stealing the food, they dumped her body on the floor, calling her an idiot. But now, back in the present, he knew this time he had to save her. First, he had to make sure she understood how cruel this apocalyptic world was, even if that meant she would see him as a bad person. She then knocked on the door and it seemed like he was going to take the role seriously because he immediately shouted asking why she was bothering him. She apologized, saying she had washed his clothes because they were too dirty. He got even angrier when he saw how kind she was. He told her to throw those clothes away and get out of there. A bit embarrassed, she said that was fine. He hadn't told himself that with such a weak personality, it would be hard for her to survive in a world like this. However, taking a hot shower like this was amazing since in the future, all the water would be contaminated. He finished his bath, knowing that luckily, this convenience store had plenty of food and water. The goal now was to obtain some equipment and weapons. Looking in the mirror, he remarked that being younger was really amazing. No back pain, no burning legs, and being young was truly incredible. The only downside was that even his abs had disappeared. He opened the bedroom door and saw that she had left a suit for him. Immediately, he shouted, asking how he was supposed to fight zombies wearing something like that. The scene shifted to the nightclub. Centipede told everyone to listen up. That convenience store definitely had food and liquor, but it wouldn't last long. The plan was to get out, kill the zombies in front and steal everything from that place. Not to mention, that maniac knew there was a cute little girl there, so it would be easy to finish everything off. He then told his brothers to go and kill the zombies so they could start the robbery. The creatures continued banging at the front of the convenience store. Meanwhile, Ibai approached and called the girl's attention. He told her to stop being so stupid and said he had a question. He wanted to know why she was there alone and what happened to her family. She explained that her father had gone to gather resources, but hadn't returned. At that moment, he slammed the table, asking if she was stupid for letting him in alone like that. What if he had wanted to do something bad to her? How would she defend herself? Frightened, the girl said that he had said he was hurt and covered in blood, so she was afraid of letting him die out there. But once again, he shouted, asking if she had noticed that he was being chased by a bunch of creatures. With a personality like that, she would just be a burden, so it would be easier for him to kill her and save himself the trouble. However, since it would be boring to be alone from now on, she would have to obey him. He warned her that she would have to do everything he said or he would kill her on the spot. The group from the nightclub was heading toward the zombies. Or rather, the zombies were heading toward them. They went out with courage, but after seeing the first one get devoured, all hesitated. They began questioning whether these creatures were different from the ones the student had killed. But Centipede told them to charge ahead or he would kill the whole group himself. However, one of them ran off, saying that dying to the zombies was scarier. Centipede then grabbed him by the hair, threw him toward the zombies, and said his wish had been granted. The fool asked how he could do such a thing. While he was being devoured, the rest of the group was finishing off the creatures. The problem was that Centipede soon realized there were too many, and they would have to flee. The peace had been disturbed by the horde following them. Meanwhile, the convenience store had become peaceful. The little girl climbed the stairs and brought some ramen to our boy, saying she had made it for him. She also brought the hot water he had asked for, but he told her to get out of there because she had done enough. He warned her that unless he called for her, she better not come into that room. With that, she closed the door and he prepared the noodles. He started eating immediately because he was starving. As soon as he tasted it, he got excited and smiled, saying it was really good. However, our boy grabbed the bottle of hot water. He started approaching and Centipede asked what he was doing. Our guy took off the cap and poured it on him. Man, his hand turned red and blistered immediately. Centipede was in agony but couldn't let go of the hand or he would fall through the zombies. Ibai told him he was an idiot for asking for help while threatening to kill someone. But at that moment, someone tugged at his sleeve. When he looked back, it was the little girl telling him to stop. She warned him that it would be better to let that guy in and stop hurting him. That surprised both the protagonist and Ibai. He immediately turned to the girl and told her to get out of there because he hadn't called for her. But she kept insisting, saying that her father had told her not to hurt others. He stood silent for a second. Then he asked if she wasn't afraid of that guy coming into the house and killing her. Centipede, however, said he would never do something like that. He was just starving and ended up in this situation because he was surrounded by zombies. The outside was already full of creatures, so unfortunately, he couldn't leave anymore. Ibai was angry that the girl had interrupted his plan to kick the guy in the head and let the zombies eat him. Then he noticed the box cutter on the table. Centipede came in, thanking her for her kindness. But he warned that now that he was inside, this was his territory and anyone who refused to obey would have to die. Now the girl realized she had made a mistake. The sky was dark and there were zombies everywhere. A bald man and a boy were blocking the door. It was the remaining people from the nightclub and the bald man said it was that bastard Centipede's fault for dragging everyone into this. The girls were all screaming in panic and they didn't know what to do because now that bastard must be dead. The worst part was that the wooden door was about to be destroyed by the creatures outside. The bald man couldn't see a way to keep the place standing. He called out to the girls, telling them to come help block the door. But as he looked at them, he thought to himself that he would have liked to enjoy them more. But unfortunately, that wasn't going to happen. The only way to survive was to run away and let them die. Back at the convenience store, Centipede stood in front of Ibai, smiling, and told the girl that she was cute but too naive to think he wouldn't kill anyone. However, now that he was inside, he would give her the chance to surrender and become his slave. Then he looked to the side and said he had to deal with the bastard who poured hot water on his hand first. Out of revenge, he made sure the boy would suffer as much as possible. But Ibai stood silently, holding the box cutter in his hand. The little girl insisted, saying that her family owned that convenience store. She added that downstairs there was chocolate, plenty of snacks, and enough food for everyone there. The two stood in silence for a second. The girl smiled, saying everyone could eat together and live peacefully and happily. Centipede lost his temper, lunging at her, asking if she was making fun of him. But the box cutter came in. In half a second, Ibai slashed at the guy's hand. Centipede screamed in agony. But Ibai spun the box cutter, ripping it in a reverse hold. Centipede blocked his move. Our boy was aiming for his throat. But it was undeniable that the guy was much bigger and landed a kick to Ibai's stomach. Our boy was thrown back, and the girl fell to the ground with him. Bleeding, Ibai walked across the room toward him. He mourned that it was the first time in his life that someone had made him this mad. Ibai couldn't believe that with one kick, the guy had broken some of his ribs. At that moment, Centipede started stomping on his leg. Our boy was in agony. Centipede wanted to know how he had killed a zombie so easily earlier. Ibai said he wouldn't tell, and the guy replied that he was asking for death. He began stomping on him, saying eventually he would change his mind. The little girl was just watching. Ibai was using this as an opportunity to teach her a lesson. But the price was already too high. He then told the guy to stop, saying he would tell him. Centipede told him to explain quickly, promising he would cause the least amount of pain when he killed him. But Ibai spat blood in his face. Of course, this didn't make the guy happy. He threw Ibai against the wall and kicked him in the stomach again. Centipede asked if he thought this was fun and started stomping on him again. Man, he told Ibai to die and hit him in the jaw. I think our boy's attempt to teach a lesson is going a bit too far. But that's when the shift finally came. The little girl whipped him across the neck. Centipede turned, asking what she thought she was doing. He shunned her hard, throwing her to the ground, and grabbed the box cutter. He screamed in a rage, saying they were both going to die. But time was up, and Ibai landed a blow to the back of his neck with a stick. With that, Centipede passed out on the floor. Our boy was exhausted and could barely stand. The frightened little girl asked if he had died. Seeing the pool of strawberry juice, she wondered if she had really killed someone. Ibai then placed a hand on her shoulder. He told her it was okay because she had done what was necessary. Besides, that bastard was an evil man. Confused, she asked why he had acted that way when all she had done was try to help him. But that's when Ibai told her that bastard wasn't dead. She seemed excited and said that if that was the case, she should save him. But our boy threw her aside. He tossed her out of the room and said he had never met anyone as stupid as her. He slammed the door, muttering that this girl really made him mad. Not to mention that bastard had now dirted his whole room. He grabbed Centipede by the leg and dragged his body toward the window. Then, with a swift kick, he sent him flying to the zombies. Man, he fell to the ground like a piece of trash. And for the zombies, it was a feast and they all gathered. That's when the poor guy opened his eyes just in time to realize he had become a meal. Ibai muttered outside that Centipede was lucky he hadn't cut off his limbs first. That's when he heard another sound nearby. In the house directly in front of him, a guy was hanging, trying to escape the zombies. The kid was about to fall, trembling, and shouting for them to leave him alone. Then someone called out to him. It was Ibai asking if anyone else was still alive in that place. The guy said that, unfortunately, he was the last one. They had held the door until one of the guys let go, and then the zombies came in and ate everyone. With a trembling voice, he begged Ibai to help him so he could stay in the convenience store. But our boy told him that wasn't going to happen, and if he didn't get out of there soon, he would end up like that guy on the ground. The boy looked down and saw Centipede being eaten. Disgusted, he turned, gathered his courage, and jumped to the next ledge. The kid was a Parker cane managing to balance on the railing. He ran across it, and our boy was just watching. Ibai was disappointed that those damn zombies hadn't managed to kill everyone from the nightclub. Time passed, but the zombies still lingered outside that place. The window was broken, and our boy opened the bedroom door. Outside, the little girl was still waiting. He asked her what she was doing there, and if he hadn't told her to go take a bath. However, she looked inside the room and saw that the body had already been dragged away. He told her not to look too much, but the guy had already gone to the first floor. The girl asked if he had escaped. He replied that in the way he had thrown the guy outside, only a god could survive. She looked a bit sad and asked why he had to kill the guy like that. Even if he was a bad person, they still had a chance to turn him around. But Ibai slammed the door above her. He asked if she was so stupid that she hadn't learned a lesson after everything that happened. No matter what she did, that guy was going to try to kill her because that's how the apocalypse was. The girl repeated the word apocalypse, saying he didn't know what he was talking about. But Ibai just walked away, saying it was stupid to waste time with her there, so he was going to take another shower. But she got up and said she wanted to talk to him. She tripped like an idiot and seemed to faint. Luckily, Ibai managed to catch her. He ran to the room and put her on the bed, wondering if she had been bitten. He didn't see any wounds, so maybe it was just a fever. He remembered there should be some medicine in that room. Now it made sense why she seemed so weak from the moment he first met her. Finally, he found the box. But when he opened it, on top of the medicine was a pink notebook. He started flipping through it and realized it was a list of blood donors. Analyzing the girl's condition and what was written there, he started to understand. It seemed like the kind of medical notebook. He wondered what she had and kept flipping through it. Her name was Yuyur and she was 14 years old. On top of that, she had leukemia. He lifted her shirt and began to understand why she had so many band-aids on her body. Perhaps because she had received donations, she always wanted to help people too. But unfortunately, that kindness she wanted to show to the world no longer existed. That's when he reached into his pocket and saw that he still had the apocalypse essences. He didn't know how effective they would be for this particular illness. But Meg was falling. Outside, the area was still full of creatures. Fortunately, the night was calm and after some time, the sun began to rise. The zombies were all standing still, but for some reason, the sun caught their attention. Sometime later, Ibai woke up. He had fallen asleep on the table and was freezing. But he soon noticed he was being watched. When he looked back, he saw Yuyur standing behind the door. He found it strange as she was already up and asked if she was feeling better. She didn't answer for a second. Before she could say anything, he told her to go ahead and prepare some coffee. As she left though, he told her to wait a second. He told her to gather some tools and food because they were going to head out to look for her father. Yuyur seemed a bit confused and asked if they were really going to do that. Ibai replied that yes, they were, especially since she said her father had gone out to get supplies so they couldn't leave him out there. This annoying girl only complained, saying her father told her to be a good girl, stay in the store, and not go out looking for him. The protagonist then asked how long her father had been gone. She lowered her head and said at least 3 days. He then asked how long it usually took. She replied that it was normally half a day. He then told her to use her brain and ask herself why he hadn't come back yet, but she yelled saying that nothing had happened because 3 days ago he shouted that he was already on his way back. However, our boy was cruel and asked if she had received any other messages in the past 3 days. He could have been bitten by zombies or fallen into a trap and might be waiting for rescue. Shouldn't they be out there trying to save the guy? But she lowered her head again and said her father told her not to leave, no matter what happened. Our boy got up angry and said she was an idiot. He asked why she wasn't willing to help her father, who might be in need of assistance. Why was she so eager to help that criminal earlier but didn't want to go out and save her father now? And he told her to understand that he wasn't asking for her opinion. He could finish her off right there and go out by himself. But because she saved him, he would first find her father's payment. He ordered her to stop whining and gather her things because they were going out. The poor girl ran off in a panic and almost fell down the stairs. Ibai was getting exhausted from these conversations. Outside, the sea was destroyed and the zombies were still staring at the sky. Until suddenly, they heard a sound. From behind, a jeep was coming down the street. Man, these crazy zombies think they can stop him with their arms. Yeah, right, grab them by the chest. Everyone goes flying to the sides, knocked out. Meanwhile, back at the convenience store, our protagonist was stocking up on food and preparing to leave. He looked behind him and asked why she was hiding and if she had finished packing everything. Looking a bit downcast, she seemed all cute but sad. Our boy asked why she was wearing that kind of outfit as they weren't going to a party. But he quickly changed the subject, asking where the instant noodles get asked for were. She handed it over and he started eating. While she looked around the store, he began planning what they were going to do once they opened the door. At the very least, he would have to kill a bunch of zombies and find a working car. Then he'd have to make sure she got into the car without doing anything stupid, which would be pretty difficult. He noticed she was eating some spicy sticks and asked for one. The girl was feeling sad from being scolded all the time. However, someone was approaching the store just as she was handing him the snack. They were standing there when in the next second, everything was thrown around. The place had turned into a mess and Ibai asked if it had been an earthquake. But a car had crashed halfway into the store. The protagonist was startled, wondering why something had invaded the store. The car was sitting there and suddenly the door opened. A man in military gear got out and started laughing. A bald chubby guy said he was lucky to find a convenience store. He kicked a zombie and stomped on it, saying that a good zombie was a dead zombie. He headed toward the store, saying it was time to fill his belly. As soon as he walked in and saw a bunch of snacks, his eyes lit up. He immediately crouched down, licking his lips, saying he had found his favorites. The city center was empty, so he came out to this deserted area and apparently got lucky. But that's when the box cutter appeared. Ibai warned him to drop everything he was holding and not to move. The last insect that had come in had already been disposed of and he wouldn't hesitate with another. But in that moment, the chubby guy moved and threw snacks at his face. Ibai closed his eyes for a second, and the guy grabbed the stash and bolted. He ran back to the car and slammed the door shut. But man, Ibai showed up at the window and wasn't going to let him escape that easily. He called the guy a filthy pig and told him to die. Just as the box cutter was about to do its work, the guy begged for forgiveness, saying he surrendered. But of course, that's when Yu told him to stop killing people. She awkwardly said that and saw both of them staring at her. She awkwardly explained that she didn't want him to die because he caused damage to the store, so someone had to pay for it. Ibai just observed while the chubby guy trembled. He made a sinister grin and said she was right. He turned to the chubby guy and told him he would have to leave the car as payment for the damage to the store. He immediately told Yu to bring her bags and load up the car because they were leaving. She agreed but then noticed something. The chubby guy apologized, saying he only destroyed the door because he was starving and didn't know they were inside. Then Yu stepped outside with her bags and was startled. There was a horde of zombies approaching because of the crash. The chubby guy was scared, wondering why there were so many, especially since he had just killed a bunch. Yu quickly jumped into the car. He closed the door and the chubby guy told them to buckle up. He immediately floored it because several zombies had lashed onto the car. He gripped the seat as the truck ran over everything and the chubby guy hit the gas hard. Man, he was tearing through the city. But the bastard seemed to be enjoying it. He was even drifting like he thought he was in Fast and Furious. Ibai told him to drive properly or he was going to get a nice slash to the neck. The chubby guy tried to explain that they needed to kill the zombies first or they wouldn't be able to get through. But that's when our boy asked Yu what address her father had gone to for supplies. She said that in his last call he was heading to the Fudong supermarket. The chubby guy said that place was crazy since it was always packed and must be crawling with zombies. But Ibai told him to stop whining and just drive or he'd be the one to die there. They seemed to escape the horde and the chubby guy said if things got boring, you could turn on some music. At least on the road they could calm down a little. The zombie lying on the ground with a branch in its hand grazed its arm. As the car approached, man, the chubby guy had no mercy and ran right over it. As he sang along to some music and ate candy, he plowed through everyone. Clearly this bastard was enjoying the whole process. And Ibai told him to be quieter because he wanted to rest a bit. But the chubby guy said not to worry as the car was very tough so there was no problem. Ibai, however, raised the box cutter and asked if he wasn't going to listen. At that moment, everything went silent and he stopped the car. Our protagonist told him that he didn't order him to stop the car just to stop making noise. That's when the chubby guy realized the gas had run out. Yoyuer and our boy screamed in frustration. He cursed the bastard who apologized, saying he forgot there wasn't a gas station nearby. He started eating frantically, saying that if he was going to die, he might as well die with a full stomach. Yoyuer, on the other hand, began to hear some noises approaching. A huge zombie appeared right in front of her window. The car had stopped right in front of a park and a horde of zombies was starting to surround them. The protagonist knew that even if the car wasn't destroyed, they were going to die trapped in there. But that's when a knife behind his seat caught his attention. The zombies were banging on the window. Suddenly, someone kicked the door, sending it flying off. Ibai calmly stepped out and the zombie came toward him. He pulled out the mask sheet and slashed through another one. Inside, Yoyuer was terrified, watching everything. But our boy was celebrating, saying the blade was sharp. Another zombie approached and he remarked that for amateurs like these, this kind of weapon was more than enough. He landed another strike and 2 more approached. He glanced to the side, kicked one in the chest, and finished off the other. The chubby guy inside the car was stunned, watching everything. Another large zombie fell to the ground. He couldn't believe that this student was so strong. Even Yoyuer was impressed. Ibai banged the handle of the knife on the car and told the chubby guy to get out. The chubby guy was terrified, but our boy warned him that if he stayed inside, he'd die sooner or later anyway. There were other cars outside, so maybe they'd be lucky enough to find some gasoline in one of them. While he dealt with the zombies, the chubby guy was supposed to start collecting some gas. He reminded him that he had been singing the whole trip, so he'd better know how to handle a vehicle. Ibai told Yoyuer to stay in the car and not leave, as it was too dangerous. Ibai then told the chubby guy to come with him. The chubby guy, still not mentally prepared, said they needed more time. But in the next second, Ibai had already killed the first zombie. The poor chubby guy couldn't believe that this boy had no fear at all. Ibai moved on, slashing through another one. He looked back and told the guy to hurry up. But the chubby guy remembered that there were some gasoline canisters in the truck bed. He realized how useful Ibai was and wanted to make better use of him. Ibai killed another zombie. He looked back and asked what the guy had said. Embarrassed, the chubby guy said he had been in shock and forgot. But if they waited a little, he'd fill up the tank. Ibai told him to wait and do that later. The chubby guy was confused. Our boy said he needed help collecting something. He opened his hand, revealing a green pearl. He explained that they were found in the brains of zombies, and while he killed them, the chubby guy was supposed to collect them. The poor guy, who had never done anything like that before, started sweating. But Ibai said it was easy and showed him how to do it. He quickly demonstrated the process and asked if the chubby guy understood. Obviously, the guy said it was too disgusting and he'd rather stay in the vehicle. Ibai warned him that if he went back to the vehicle, he'd end up as ground meat. The chubby guy then asked how he was supposed to do it without a knife. Our boy told him to use his hands, saying he was going in. And if the guy didn't help, he'd be killed too. With that, Ibai took a step forward and finished off another zombie. The chubby guy, disgusted, approached the first zombie. He ran back to the jeep, grabbed a tool, and prayed for protection. The protagonist said they didn't have time to waste and told him to start collecting right away. But the chubby guy, hesitant, wondered if the zombie was still alive. He struck it and went to collect the pearl, impressed that it was actually easier than he thought. There really was a little crystal inside. He never imagined that the human head produced something like that. He then asked Ibai if those were worth a lot, but Ibai told him to shut up. The chubby guy began to think that maybe this was why humans had turned into zombies and wondered if he should keep a few. Meanwhile, Ibai was finishing off another batch. After a while, he said that was enough, and they wouldn't bother with the ones farther away. He thought to himself that getting used to this body without training was quite difficult. He turned and asked the chubby guy how many he had collected. The chubby guy was proud of saying he had gotten several. He said it was fun, and Ibai told him to clean them and store them. Then it was time to fill the tank so they could get moving. Ibai then went to check on Yuyu. However, her illness seemed to have worsened again. He was startled and grabbed her arm, calling her name. He placed a hand on her forehead and realized the fever was worse than before. He began rummaging through her bag, remembering that they had grabbed some medicine and water. The chubby guy appeared and asked what was wrong with her, but Ibai told him to shut up and fill the gas tank. After some time, she seemed to have stabilized a bit. The chubby guy suggested that maybe it was because she had stayed in the heat of the car for too long and asked if she was feeling better. Ibai, not in the mood for chit-chat, threatened him again. He said they had lost time because the chubby guy pretended they had no gas, and if he hit anything else, the next person to die would be him. The chubby guy immediately apologized, saying he would never hide anything again. Yuyu seemed to wake up and the car continued down the road. After a while, the chubby guy complimented our boy's swordsmanship and asked what his name was. Our protagonist replied that it was polite to give your own name before asking someone else's. The chubby guy said his name was Zhao Hang, and he owned a workshop in the city. His friend had left this truck at the shop for repairs and never came back to pick it up because of the apocalypse. Then our boy said his name was Ibai, but suddenly Zhao Hang slammed on the brakes and our boy had to hold on as he drifted on the road. The protagonist immediately threatened him, asking why he did that. Zhao Heng explained that the entire road ahead was blocked by burning vehicles.